Welcome to Bat Therapy, mental health through the lens of comics and film. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness.
We are your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown and educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and social media and find our Patreon at patreon.com/battherapy.
This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources. All right, so last week we released an episode with my friend Carolyn Cohagen talking about her graphic novel. So, friendly reminder, this memoir will be written by robots. Please check out that episode. Check out the link to her graphic novel that's available online. So, a lot of talk about AI, the virtual worlds, virtual reality, technology, all this stuff. We talked about a lot of cool stuff all together. One of the things that sparked for me as I was reading her graphic novel that I ended up looking into for our spotlight this week, I know that chatbots have started becoming something that has potential for therapy.
Yeah.
And so I took the opportunity to kind of look into that a little bit. I think most people probably know Chat GPT and you reach out, you talk to an AI thing, it responds to you, you give it prompts, blah, blah. So when it comes to psychotherapy, talk therapy with someone to help with a person's mental health in one way or another, they actually have been doing a lot of work in this area. So, on the one hand, I think there's a lot of conversations about how useful is this? So, if we're struggling as humans, it can be useful to be interacting with another human to help with being able to be vulnerable, open up, express, be able to shift yourself in the way that leads to healing.
Right.
On the flip side, people aren't perfect. AI isn't either.
Right.
But people require a lot of training to be reliable resources. AI might be something that potentially could be more easily reliable once you figured out how to input the right information and create the right structure for it. And then perhaps most importantly, there aren't enough therapists out there. And so one of the big things that people talk about is we need help, and can technology help with that?
Right.
So it's an interesting realm that a lot of us haven't touched with the 10-foot pole, but there are some psychologists doing some really cool work trying to create AI and chatbots for therapy purposes, which is really interesting. Yeah. What are your thoughts on it?
So the thing is, it's like when I think about talking to someone, in my mind it doesn't connect as well for me, because in my mind it's like if I know that it isn't real, it kind of takes me out of it. Like if I'm like, for example, if it was a chat, if I was using like if it was a chat bot and it was just an automated response, even though it's AI, it's like I know there's not someone on the other end that actually cares. And so it kind of takes it away from me. Like it's almost like I might as well be I might as well have a private blog at that point, because
which for some people might be helpful,
right,
granted, but would be
absolutely
different than therapy. Yeah.
right,
You hit on a really interesting point that I've wondered about. So first and foremost, there's placebo for any treatment a person does. And so the very fact that we're doing something that we think could be helpful helps it work for us. Now, a treatment that actually works is one that, the simplest version is, say, you give someone the actual pill versus giving them a sugar pill. And so the act of taking a pill that you think is going to help, even though it's a sugar pill, it does help improve whatever symptoms you're trying to treat. But it does not improve things as much as taking the pill that's meant to treat it, right? And so they do these things actually where they work against placebo, because it's like, is it just the fact that we think it's going to work that might help, or is there actually something else going on? So I think what you're talking about is really interesting, where if you're seeing it as this is not a real person, this this isn't what I need to make something useful for myself in terms of therapy, it it could actually, even if it gave you all the things that you might need for therapy, that could actually affect how helpful it is for you.
Right.
On the flip side, I do wonder, because we tend to personify things.
Yeah.
Pets, for example, we treat them like humans. Now, granted, they're living beings and they have their own experiences, but we a lot of times will treat them like a kid, even though obviously they're a different kind of organism than us. So the tendency we have to personify things, I wonder how much that could factor in to get around some of what you're talking about. And actually, some people who have interacted with some of these therapy chatbots, they've talked about some of the oddities that like, okay, you can tell, at least for now, you can tell that it's a chatbot, and there can be some quirks that you're not entirely sure about. But some people talk about coming around to it anyway
Right.
and actually starting to personify the chatbot for themselves.
Yeah. And like in I go back and forth because I feel like naturally, like I tend to be a, I can be pretty neurotic.
Mm.
And so because of that, on one hand, it's like, okay, if I'm talking to a chatbot, I appreciate the fact that I know I'm not going to be judged,
Ah, that could work to its favor.
right? I
Yeah.
appreciate that. But at the same time, I think because of where AI is, I wouldn't
Mm.
fully trust it.
That's fair.
Like, I
There's a
still
lot of
type,
work to be done.
right, like ChatGPT still gives me incorrect answers sometimes.
Aha. Okay. So I think there are a few things here. So there's a lot of work to be done, absolutely. And when it comes to healthcare, things tend to be a lot slower because the 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 negative potential negative outcomes are big, right?
Right.
So we're dealing with people's lives. And so when that happens, yeah, thing you want to wait until the technology's ready. And so
Yeah, definitely. Because, like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, this sounds like the potential for a WebMD thing where it's like a stub toe and you type it in on WebMD and it's like might be cancer and it's like but it's a stub toe, right? And so
so
it's
yeah.
yeah.
So interestingly, one of the things I came across, and the article linked for our spotlight this week talks about it. Um, there was an eating disorder treatment chatbot. I think it was called Tessa, and uh, it was really promoted in terms of being helpful. Although, so I think they fired all their staff that were on the chat line and replaced it with the AI, which
Mm,
interesting choice. But aside from that piece,
don't like that.
uh, and I only read that part in one place, so uh, I'd have to triple check those sources, but so it sounds like they prioritize the AI. There's essentially open versus closed ways of having these bots. And so open is it accesses everything, it can have any responses, versus closed, you're trying to essentially create more of a box of how it's supposed to respond and what it's supposed to talk about, which makes a lot of sense if you're thinking about there's a certain treatment focus. So you need to focus on these treatment courses that we know are going to be
Hmm.
helpful. What it was saying is the drawback is it tends to feel more robotic at times. It might not feel as fluid, but you're going to be less likely to say end up with the Twitter AI chatbots that start getting racist within like 2 days. Um, so just little things like that.
It's the Michael
So
Scott. Nope, don't like that.
but you still have to be so careful. So, they had all these consultants, they were doing all of these things, they developed it very carefully. there was some sort of transition in, I think, the ownership of the chatbot. All of a sudden, people with eating disorders were talking with the chatbot, and they were being given things to do that actually are risk factors to getting an eating disorder. Calorie counting, even marking to measure how much stomach fat you have, like really bad stuff.
Yikes.
Yeah, not good. So the theory is that with that transition, there might have been something with the transition and any new programming where things became more open format instead of the closed format, without meaning to. And then all of a sudden, you have what is supposed to be supporting people, improving, getting better with an eating disorder, actually giving them things that are more likely to exacerbate it or even cause an eating disorder.
Right.
So it's, yeah, the technology, you've got to be very delicate and careful. And just like we were talking about with Carolyn last time, we have to be careful of assuming that just because it's technology, meaning that it will be perfect. We are creating it with imperfections, and we have to be careful what it uses
Right.
to support someone.
And the thing is too, another issue is every single person on this planet is unique and
Mm.
different. You can spit out 12 symptoms, and a computer can guarantee you, hey, this is what's wrong with this person.
Mm.
We know that's not the reality, right? Like, we know, like, COVID, flu, common cold, all the same symptoms, all very different,
I
right?
see what you're saying. So
And
how well could it actually tease apart
right,
the dirty real life gray areas of
right.
things?
Because I
Yeah.
know when you sit down with someone, you're taking everything into account. You're taking their childhood into account, you're taking their job into account, you're taking all of that, right? And you're also coming up with the right things to ask them.
Mm.
I don't I'm I don't know if I could come I don't know if AI is at that point where it's like it doesn't get to the point where it just loops back.
Yeah. So that once again is key at the point of, right? What AI, what true AI is something that could learn and grow and, be able to create these responses, but we're still in very very early stages of these things, right? And so I think one thing that you point out is actually really important. And actually, I was reading something, it was talking about nuances where I forget the exact phrase, but someone used a phrase purposefully to test it out that essentially insinuated based on just like little phrases that they might be thinking about suicide, but they didn't
Mhm.
directly say anything. And it was more just a little bit of a shift of like common phrases we might say as people. But it was something that hopefully most clinicians familiar with the English language um, would would say, "Oh, hold on, let's dig into that a little bit more." But the chatbot wasn't able to identify that kind of nuance. Now, like you said, it's not at that point yet. And here's a on the flip side argument. Um, it's hard. It you can know all the questions to ask, and you can know how important all these different things about a person, how important all those things are, and it's hard. It's hard to be able to evenly balance those things. It's hard not to. We as people, how our minds work, we can hone in on one thing that we think is the answer, and we can have trouble questioning that one hypothesis and exploring the others. um, because of all the different things we're juggling, we can forget to ask a certain question, or we can forget something about their past that might be important. Where theoretically, with AI, there might be better standardization and reliability in certain things. Or, for example, a long-standing issue we have is we overdiagnose African Americans, for example, with psychosis. Now, if you input the wrong data into the chatbot, it too will overdiagnose.
Right.
But if we really hone in on what are the factors that lead to, and that's just one example. Another example is overdiagnosis of bipolar disorder when it might be PTSD or ADHD or borderline personality disorder, right? So there are these different nuances that if we can better understand them, it's going to be easier, theoretically, says the person who has no knowledge of how they do this. But theoretically, if you can build that into these systems, it's going to be a lot easier than making sure every single clinician out there is trained. And by the way, retrained, and helping update everybody so that we're all reliable with each other. So
Yeah.
when the technology gets there, there might be certain things that we prefer to say have the AI do that the clinicians maybe reserve their time for other things.
Yeah.
Sort of like, you do blood draws and labs, and, there are certain things that uh, might, if the technology improves, might make sense for the AI to do over the therapist. I don't know.
Right. I think that there could be a place for it, but I think in just me personally, I
Yeah.
think that where AI could be used is pretty much the survey that I fill out anyway when you're applying to therapy, and it's like check here for all that apply. And it's because it's like I said, it's one of those things. According to WebMD, I've been dead since 2008, right? Like if you type it
But
in,
keep in mind, WebMD is not AI
I
owned,
know, I
right?
know, I know it isn't.
So
You're
so
absolutely
if you
right.
think if
And
you think of, okay, so they will take all of the information we know about therapy, and it'll take what I'm telling it, it will consolidate all that together, and it will create a treatment plan for me
right,
that is individualized to me based on all of the recent up to date research on treatments.
right.
That could be really cool.
It could
Um,
be. You're absolutely right. I
at the
another
end of the day, I'm not saying that's gonna be an easy thing to accomplish,
and I
where
will say
it's gonna take a lot of work to do that.
I also have a source of bias because I am a high school teacher that
Mm,
is constantly reading AI generated research papers that students turn in
ah,
that are clearly flawed and very inaccurate.
you're seeing
And
the
so,
ugly side of how not
yes,
ready AI. But keep in mind, they're using ChatGPT. So there once again, there's a lot of things being tested out. There are actually some chatbots out there for psychotherapy. It's not something that anyone everywhere can um, can use at this point, but I totally hear you. Um, it is, I think, one of those things that um is also like for you and I wonder if it's going to hit different. So for example, someone of the boomer generation, it's going to hit different than for us.
right,
And then for us versus like generation alpha, I wonder how it might hit for them. It might not feel as weird to them, especially depending on when some of this stuff starts coming up. It might be like for us, taking a photograph
right.
or recording a video is not that big of a deal.
Hmm.
um, where for other people, they have little to no photos and videos when they were a kid, right? So
Right.
some of this stuff for us might also feel a little weird when it's for the alphas, or I don't remember who comes after
Yeah. And
them.
I think it's just because, like you said, I think a big key too is a lot of people need a lot of different things. And
Yeah.
so, from my perspective, it's me literally sitting down, talking to someone, breaking my stuff down, going back and forth. Um, and it's kind of like with the a chat bot. Like the last time I had to interact with uh like like even if it's something like my internet isn't working and you're trying to contact your cable company and they're like, "Hi, I'm James. Nice to meet you. How can I help you today?" And I'm like, and I remember, and I literally typed, "Am I speaking with a real person?" And there was like a little bit of a response, and James was like, "I can assure you, I am very much a real human being." And I'm like, that's exactly what a chatbot would say, right? Like, and now I'm overthinking it,
Uh, yeah.
and now I'm just like, what am I doing here? And I'm scared that that's what I would do with an AI
So I think we're
therapist.
a long ways from you needing to be worried about that. Um, how things are at this point, that is one of the bigger factors. Even for what they've rolled out, that once again they've put a lot of time and attention into just where the technology is at this point. It does not feel as natural as a person does. Argument's sake, though, at a certain point, it probably will. And if it does, then there might be some really helpful things it can do. I think, yeah, I mean, there are all these scary things that we can think about with that, like how will we know if we're talking to people versus AI and all the science fiction scary stuff. But
Hmm.
if we set the scary stuff aside and we just think about if technology can get to that place, I mean, it could be a really cool way of of helping people maneuver through some of these things. Like you said too, I mean, aside from making sure there's more access, especially if there's more baseline stuff, like let's say the technology can only go so far. Well, if it can help with a lot of the basic stuff, and then if there's um more complicated things or more long-standing issues, then like next level up, someone works with a human therapist, for example,
Okay, I like that. Yeah.
or maybe they do some of the diagnostic pieces, that maybe some standardization is useful for, where human bias might come into play in ways that aren't helpful. What's interesting to me too, though, is potentially if the technology gets good enough and it becomes more human, then what's interesting though is could then the chatbots then be at a point where they're having their own experiences and their own consciousness with those experiences to the point that they're actually human enough in what they experience, that then that gap goes away, where it's like, okay, well, now they can relate to us.
Right.
That's something I don't know, maybe.
Huh. Yeah.
Thanks for nerding out with us. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown.
And I'm educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JVS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And don't forget our Patreon page at patreon.com/battherapy. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.